little like 5 minutes after two. And my name is Abdullah Abakar. I work as a programs officer communications with Empowering Women for Excellence initiatives. Today, we're excited to have you here in this webinar to explore the topic power dynamics. Our host for today is the convener of the Kabylon Africa think tank, Safia Ibn Garba, DTRF. She is the founder and the programs director of Empowering Women for Excellence Initiative.
So thank you, Ladan, for introducing me, and I'm really happy to see everyone. We're going to start off immediately because I'm really excited to hear the case studies and how we're moving from theory, as it were, to practice. Excuse me. So I'm just going to take a little bit of time to share about the theory and the concept of power dynamics and mapping. As you know, this has been organized by Kabylon Africa think tank, which is hosted by Empowering Women for Excellence Initiative. And the CAT, as we call it, CAT is really about establishing the Africa we deserve. So if you haven't joined us already, please make sure to join us as a membership form. Our team will be putting it in the chat box as we go along, and also join us in our LinkedIn group so that you can get all the information about what's going on. So I'm going to try and be as fast as possible in this section. So we're talking about power dynamics and mapping, and we're going straight into it to kind of discuss what are power dynamics. So power here is refers to the distribution and interplay. So it's not just the distribution of power, it's also the interplay of power and how it works between individuals or groups within a system. And you will find that a lot of the time well, at least when I'm speaking and a few others, we're going to talk a lot about systems because everything we live in is a system essentially, and even we are walking systems. And what power dynamics do is that they highlight the relationship and influence that each party holds over each other. So that's kind of a holistic definition of power dynamics, distribution and interplay of power. So the interaction of power, or the interaction essentially between the parties, and it involves hierarchy. So positions within an organization or social structure that dictate authority levels. So you cannot talk about power dynamics without hierarchy. That even if, and we constantly see that in some of our spaces and in our governance spaces, where you find someone at the top, but they may not really know about their job, or they're not doing very well in their job. However, they are placed at the top of the hierarchy. Then we have resource control. That's another dynamic, another element of power dynamics. It means access to information, finances, or assets that give people power. So there's often a joke whenever I go into a new place, maybe a new nonprofit or any office. If I visit an office and I'm introduced to the finance person, I usually say that's the most important person in the room, regardless of how senior the person I'm talking to is. Why? Because they have access to finances and other assets. The other thing the power dynamics involves is social influence. So the ability to sway actions or opinions through their charisma or reputation. And I know you know people like this that, they say something is a certain way, it is a certain way. Like they just have, I don't know, in Nigeria, call it sweet mouth. You're just able to influence anyone, as they all. I think abroad another proverb that they use is that some people can sell ice to an Eskimo, right? Because they're so influential in how they speak. Then also decision making power. Now, decision making power sometimes is quite different from the hierarchy because in informal systems, there are people. Probably we can think about our traditional institutions, right, where you have what they call kingmakers or ruler makers, people who are there who can make decisions. They have the ability to directly impact key decisions within a group, and you always have to remember these people, whether they are formally or not. They don't, whether they have a title or not. Okay. Then we often say, so this is an interesting one. We often say people have power. Why we say that? It's not always necessarily that, they are powerful, but they control the resources that other people value. And therefore, that's what makes them powerful. When you talk about power dynamics, you always have to think about the resources that others value, whatever it is, because that is different in every single context. So you always say that a person has power because they have some level of control over the resources that other people value. So I hope this is clear so far. I always like to make sure that, everyone is with me. So let me just ask for some kind of affirmation that you're with me. Thumbs up is nice. An emoticon is nice. Yes, yes, yes. Thank you, guys. All right. So we've talked about power dynamics. Let's look at power mapping. Okay, so power mapping is a visual tool. So that's one important thing, that it's visual, and research shows us that most learners, like the majority of learners from that research sample size, are visual learners. They prefer visuals, and that's why I guess we love to watch TV. We love to watch this or that. But it's used to identify and analyze the power dynamics. So it's essentially, kind of putting that power dynamics in a visual form. And it helps us to chart key players' level of influence, their connections within a specific context. I think it was Felicity that mentioned that, allowing for a strategic understanding of who to target to achieve a desired outcome. And I really like Ambrose's point from before of including others in the power mapping that you do. Yeah. Especially when you're looking at particular issues, but you do want to make sure that it's very important that you identify the people, the key people, those that have the power. And in the language of power mapping, okay, so sorry, I'll come to what's in the chat. Okay, is the most influential people in power mapping are known as central individuals. So these are the ones who are perceived to have the most power, or have the most control over the resources that people need. And when you want to visualize your power map, you want to consider two questions: what is it that people value? So that's very interesting, because there might be an issue, but you also want to make sure that you're centralizing what it is that people value, so that you understand who has access to what people value. And that helps you identify your central individuals. Now, there are two common power mapping mistakes. One of them is omission, actually neglecting to identify individuals who are as powerful when they're central and highly influential. So you may always think, and this is the thing, that you may always think that, oh, it's the person in the hierarchy that has the title that is the most powerful, but that's not necessarily the case. Okay. And then commission, assuming people are more powerful and influential than they actually are. So when you want to do a wholesome power map, you are certainly looking at those who do not have power. But then you don't assume, again, like, if you identify a person that doesn't have power, be clear that this person doesn't have power, and you can use a different kind of format or way to do it. But two of those most common mistakes are omission and commission, either omitting those who are powerful, or you are giving those who do not have as much power the power that they don't have. Power dynamics and mapping for policy change. So when you are involved in policy advocacy, policy change, policy anything, analysis, so on and so forth, you're going to have to be engaged in power dynamics and mapping. And this is particularly important for those of us who are going to do advocacy activities coming up. And we'll have more information on that on the General Assembly Day. But it is used for understanding the power dynamics. So it's used as a strategic planning tool for, whether it's amongst individuals or organization, and can develop strategies, can help you develop strategies to achieve your goals by focusing on key decision makers. So when you go out and you're doing your advocacy, policy advocacy, or any kind of advocacy, you want to make sure that you're using power maps to help you understand the dynamics and develop targeted strategies. As we've said, it's used for advocacy and activism. So power mapping helps us activists identify our allies, our opponents, and the most effective avenues to influence change. Okay, so potential allies, people who could be on our side. That's why we always say when you're looking for change within a system or institution, you need to find advocates within that place. Opponents, people who will oppose the change you're planning, and then okay, what's the best way to work with them? And then negotiation and collaboration can help for negotiation. Recognizing the power dynamics in a group allows you for more informed and effective coordination. So these are some like real life applications and uses of understanding power dynamics and mapping for policy change, which is one key thing that CAT is about. So I just wanted to give an honorable mention to, should I say, a noteworthy concept, okay? And it's called 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, or Bacon's Law. So Kevin Bacon is an actor, he's an American actor. And he poses this theory, which actually comes from another theory that's called 6 degrees of separation. Now, the 6 degrees of separation theory came up from the Hungarian writer Frigyes Karinthi in a short story in 1929. And as you know, a lot of these theories that we use and work with, they all have their origins, many, many, many years ago. And that was further developed by social psychologist Stanley Milgram in the 60s. Okay. And Bacon's Law came, it's like an iteration of the 6 degrees of separation. And what 6 degrees of separation is that it's the idea that all people are 6 or fewer social connections away from each other. As a result, a chain of a friend statements can be made to connect any 2 people in a maximum of 6 steps. It's also known as the 6 handshake rule. Now, one of the places that you will see this most, should I say, displayed is in social media. Do you notice how on social media, excuse me, you will see people you may know, or you will see suggested for you? Because sometimes you will see, this person knows that person who knows that person who knows that person. And the law, yes, exactly, on Facebook. And the law actually says it's 6 degrees of separation. So in 6 steps, you can connect any 2 people. This is a theory. And I think social media has really kind of proven it to a large extent. If you look at social media like, say, LinkedIn, for example, right? In fact, there it's much more obvious, because there you will see first level connection, second level connection, third level connection. It means if there's a second level connection, it means you and that person know somebody in common. Okay. So thank you, Mukhtar. So this is actually the law. And so Kevin Bacon also kind of, it's a game. actually, okay? And it's Bacon's law, and it states it's connected that anyone in the world, especially within the acting world, is connected to Kevin Bacon, because it's very unlikely I'm connected to Kevin Bacon in 6 steps, maybe in 12 steps, who knows? But I doubt even the 12 steps. But this theory, at least within a system, so, for example, within Hollywood, that's how it came about. That within Hollywood, it can be applied to, sorry, 6 degrees, not 7 degrees. The theory has real life applications in networking and investigations. So, what his law states is that within 6 degrees, you can connect anyone to actor Kevin Bacon. And Kevin Bacon has done a lot of movies. He's been in Hollywood for decades. I can't think of a movie that comes to mind now, but I have watched a lot of Kevin Bacon movies. He's a good actor. And yeah, so what this is saying is that you can also apply to 7 degrees. It's not as if, oh, it has to be six, but that's essentially what it's made of, because it's based off the 6 degrees of separation. And as we said, you can use the theory to network with your colleagues in your company, in your organization, to help you connect with people who need help. So, like what they did with Kevin Bacon, so Bacon's law is okay, they put Bacon in the middle, and they said, all right, okay, who has Kevin Bacon acted with, been in a movie with? And then with that connection, you start, okay, that person, who is that person connected to, and so on. So, why am I saying this? That you can use this law, you can apply the 6 degrees of separation or Kevin Bacon's law to kind of find connections amongst people who have power. I remember being in a, I don't know, seminar discussion one day, and they were talking about, it was somehow we talked about power, and there were decision makers, policymakers, and so on. And, someone said, look, for me, the best way I know if I want to get something with this person, I will just find a way to someone who knows his wife. And this is where the decision maker was a man. Who knows his wife. And I've actually seen an experience where the wife of the wife was the one who got someone into a position. So this is a helpful kind of fun way to do it. You can actually, there's a step. If you go to the website of 6degrees.org, it shows you the step. You can use it as a game. You can do it in your organization to help you map, power map, and not just power map, just systems map. So you understand who is connected to who and how you can support their whatever it is you want to change. But I'm just going to say that I'm excited to hear about the case studies we're going to have today. As usual, you will get this presentation just so you know the sources of what we've talked about. Is Harvard Business School online? Yes, they will be shared. Beautiful Trouble, Power Mapping, the Common Social Change Library, Power and Power Mapping. So please, as you know, we will always make reference to and give full copyright to where we have gotten material. And I encourage you to go and look at these sources, even the ones before now. The other thing, as I round up, is to thank you as usual, because my bit is over. I just want to introduce a theory, and we're going to go into actual case studies of how power dynamics and power mapping was used. And as you get this, if you're not a member, please join.
So thank you so very much for this exciting session, and I believe this conversation will continue. So continue to follow the CAPS LinkedIn group. The link will be shared in the chat box. If you're not in the group, follow the group so as some of these conversations will be picked up from there, and we will share a lot of ideas and opportunities down there. So we'll move on to the case studies. We'll hear from 4 of our speakers how they were able to use power dynamics to implement projects in their various communities and their respective countries. So we have 4 speakers, and we'll go in alphabetical order, starting with Ambrose.
Thank you so much, Ladan. Thank you so much. So I'm going to share a case study on this, and I'll go straight forward to the next slide. a chunk of the previous info was shared before. So this basically is the layout of my presentation, which will be very brief, as it follows one another to now conclude even with what will be the final thoughts from that case study. So when you see this picture, it tells you a lot of information, and basically now that we are moving from the talk of equality to more of justice, and also more or less of equity, then now the aspect of policy issues comes in. And when you talk of policy issues, of course now different players in the same comes in play, and sometimes inequality comes in because we have inefficient policies, or rather there are no policies, and that's why you find that a majority of the people are left behind, and it creates a huge gap in between, and therefore that's why now the aspect of power mapping and dynamics comes in very handy to now have the right people to engage in terms of even policy issues, either through development, reviewing, implementation, and so on. So these just basically a few statistics and graphics to show us why this process is important. Now, this slide, I think most of the information was covered on power dynamics and mapping. I may not repeat, and just to look at why this process is important is to bring about the aspect of inclusive development to address the power imbalances, just to ensure that we are amplifying the voices of the underrepresented people in our communities, so that we don't leave anyone behind as per our SDGs. Straightforward to the case study, I combined two case studies, one that was done in Bungoma and West Pokot, of course through our project implementation. And basically what led about this is because when you look at the women in our communities, especially in the rural setting, is that they are majorly disadvantaged in terms of limited resource access and control, and also even how they make decisions, either at household level or even at the economic level, and also in terms of climate adaptation strategies, specifically on agroecology. Women are left behind, and therefore it's because of these particular reasons that led to starting off a discussion in terms of having a policy in place on climate change and agroecology to ensure that women are included even in decision-making table and in those climate change committees at the county level. And this was so because of the gap on the policy focus, whereby there is no strengthening in terms of commitment to integrate gender considerations into climate programs, even at the national level. So that was the reason behind that particular conversation. Now, looking at the objectives, is one was actually to ensure that the county-led climate policies are addressing the needs of the women in the rural areas when it comes to resilience and adaptation. Then number two was to mobilize the relevant stakeholders to actually support the gender-sensitive climate adaptation funding, and also even making decisions. And then lastly, to develop the climate change and the agroecology policy. So those were the three main objectives of the entire process. Now, how do we do it? the process was the first step was okay to identify the key actors, that is from different departments, ministries, and also even agencies, that is the county climate departments, the gender officers, civil society organizations, women-led groups, and also even the donors who are supporting projects. So then after doing the identification, we did what you call analyzing in terms of their level of influence and interest to now come up with the power matrix, and categorize the stakeholders based on their level of influence and also interest. We will now see this deeper in the next slide. Then thirdly, now building the alliance, doing documentation and also monitoring the entire process, where now we involved actors like the Touch Africa, who are very much skilled in this area of policy drafting and so on. So that was the process in 3 steps. Now, how did we do the analysis, the methodologies? So the first method we use is the personal analysis to analyze the stakeholders in terms of the political aspect, the economic aspect, social bit of it, technology, of course. Of course, there's also legal implication of policies. Then, lastly, environmental factors into this. Now that we are talking about, climate change and also agroecology. And therefore, now this process helped us to identify external influences from government, regulation, and other economic conditions in play. And then now the following 3 methods enable us to now be able to understand which kind of stakeholders are we bringing on board on the project, at what phase, when, how, and also where, of course, because now there are those that will come even at the initial stage of the project. There are those who will engage in between. There are those who will engage at the tail end. Then we have those that will be engaging throughout the process of project implementation, or the process of doing policy advocacy, drafting, formulation, and so on. Therefore, the outcome for this is that now we came up with a comprehensive list of all relevant stakeholders to ensure that no key player was overlooked or was left behind or outside. So this was the methodology that we adopted to analyze and do the category. Then next is now we did the classification. After we did the analysis, we did the classification. Now to understand who has high power and also at the same time high interest. And therefore here now the Ministry of Agriculture, Environmental Department, the gender people came at this level. So now the major goal was now to keep these kind of stakeholders engaged closely and throughout the process, because most of them even they also advise you on which kind of policy aspects to look at, and also some of the clauses that we also look at, are they in line with the national policies. Then number 2 is now those that have high power but low interest, basically just to keep them satisfied, and they were majorly the large agribusinesses people who are majorly focused on industrial farming. And the aim was basically to show them the economic and sustainability benefits of why we are coming up with these climate change and agroecology policy practices. Thirdly is those that have lower power and high interest. So these are the people that we need to keep them informed. And these are basically the smallholder farmers who are directly affected by the climate change and the agroecology policies that we are having a discussion at hand. But then they have limited decision power. They don't have power to make that decision. And therefore, they need to be continuously informed and mobilized at the grassroots level for advocacy. Then lastly, those that have lower power and at the same time have low interest. So these are basically, the normal consumers who, are not aware of these things. They don't have any power to do any influence. They don't have any interest in this kind of discussion. So what we did is now to have campaigns, awareness, civic education with this category of people, so that now we're able to shift their interest towards this kind of climate-friendly practices in terms of policy. The actions that we took is one, we facilitated multi-stakeholder dialogues. We did policy briefs and also, demonstrating the gender climate link and agroecology. Then number two is we conducted media advocacy through processions, radio shows, and local newspapers to amplify the issues in the climate sector. Why that policy is very important, specifically to address women issues. Then thirdly, we engage the county officials through breakfast meetings, roundtable discussions, providing data or evidence of gender disparities in the climate resilience. Then lastly, we and international donor interests to push for policy changes, drafts, and reviews. And in all these things, you find that this is a multifaceted, which is not actually a one man's show. Now, what were the results that we achieved? So result number one is that in Bungoma, this initiative led to development of a climate change policy, embedding adaptive strategies to include gender sensitive budgeting, climate financing, and these aligned to the Maputo protocol. And this policy was now came fully into effect in 2020. And then result number two, currently in West Pokot, we have an agroecology policy draft in place. That's a zero draft, and therefore now we are looking into now this policy, this draft being reviewed by stakeholders and external parties to include the inputs, and then now it's adopted by the county, which now will address these issues on sustainable agriculture, fair and inclusive food systems, soil health, biodiversity, climate resilience. It also strengthen the local market systems, indigenous knowledge systems, and also to advance social equity, as we saw in our initial pictorial. Then also women's representation in local climate committees is increased by 20% in West Pokot and also in Bungoma. Then a new funding mechanism was established to support women-led climate adaptation, what we call the green enterprises. Then lastly, because this model was a success, it was replicated in the neighboring counties, Busia and Trans Nzoia. So these were the tangible results that we were able to achieve through this process of power mapping, dynamics, and so on. The lessons that we learned, one is that data-driven advocacy is very powerful. You can't advocate without evidence. You must have evidence, and that is statistics or data, impact stories to even help shift the perspectives of the policymakers. Secondly, high power but low interest actors, they require strategic engagement. That is through framing the climate adaptation as an economic and social issue, which now will gain traction with other policymakers to now even come on board. Thirdly, community participation strengthens advocacy. You have to involve the grassroots organizations, and this enhances legitimacy and the policy buy-ins. What we call now the people who are marginalized or who are left behind, who are basically the community members. Then lastly, multi-stakeholder collaboration is very key. Partnering with the CSOs, donors, increases even the pressure on decision makers to wake up and act. So what were the final thoughts or the conclusions for the entire process? Is that power mapping is very instrumental in identifying and influencing decision makers. We can't leave out power mapping. It is the first step that we have to do. Even when we are doing the project implementation, before we do that, we have to do stakeholders mapping. We have to analyze the stakeholders to ensure that each and every party is involved and at what stage of this project. Secondly, policy change is a long-term process which requires continuous persistence. It requires adaptability, flexibility, and also lastly is building coalitions or alliances in this or relationships in this. And then lastly, a future focus. Scaling the process of policy advocacy through mapping dynamics and also research. Actually, yeah, this approach scaling to other counties and integrating it into national climate adaptation policies can bring what you call even a spillover effect, because if other counties can replicate the same, then it means it's bring what you call the spillover effect in this, and at the end it brings about sustainable development. So therefore, policy advocacy through power mapping and dynamics of advocacy is a very important aspect. Um, so that was the end of my presentation. Therefore, sometimes, as I said earlier, inequalities come about because when we have inefficient policies, or we don't have policies, or we have policies that we are not implementing, and therefore now that's when now advocacy comes into unearth such kind of issues. So thank you so much, and that was my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ambrose. That was really a very, very extensive, broad one and very, very much impactful. Though we are a little bit over the time, but we're here to learn, and I believe we're all learning. One of the things that stood out for me is the steps Ambrose took in addressing this issue, or in his mapping. He took three very important steps, which include identifying the key stakeholders, because you need to know who are even the stakeholders. Targeting the wrong people is planning to fail. So knowing the right stakeholders will help you to even plan better, and then analyze their influence and interest. If you targeted the stakeholders, if they are not interested in whatever you are advocating for, is you are also planning to fail. So you either plan to change their interest, or plan to target the stakeholders that have interest in that particular topic and also have influence to make decisions, and then build alliances, make proper documentations and monitor. These are really very, very much important steps. And the stakeholder analysis and the methodologies used were a very, very good ones. And I believe these presentation slides will be shared with all of us so that we can go to it whenever we want to revisit something from the presentation. So without wasting much time, we'll move to the next speaker, which is Esther Moronga. So Esther, if you're ready, over to you. So we kindly ask you to be audible and stick to time as much as you can. So over to you, Esther.
Okay, thank you so much, Abdullahi. Thank you, Sophia and Ambrose. Listening to you has been very informative. Since I've already been introduced, we can go to the next slide. Okay, Ms. Sophia talked about this, what power mapping is. It's a way to identify who has power in the community and figure out what will move them to do whatever you want. So you want to know who's on your side, and they can influence other people, who might oppose your plan, who can oppose your plan but will be brought to your side, and what are the effective ways to communicate with them. Next slide, please. So the issue that I was addressing in this particular case study was Kisumu County records some of the highest malaria cases in Kenya. Yet, despite the availability of the malaria vaccine, uptake remained low due to factors such as widespread misinformation, vaccine hesitancy, limited community awareness of vaccine benefits, and skepticism from caregivers due to cultural beliefs and past vaccine experiences. So, in this regard, I was program lead for the immunization department at Kenya Malaria Youth Corps. Next slide, please. So the goal for this particular case study was to increase public awareness and acceptance of the malaria vaccine through an audiovisual podcast session for 2024's World Malaria Day, that's last year. We wanted to provide clear and factual information on malaria vaccination. We wanted to engage key influencers to shape the perceptions of the public around Kisumu County, and we also wanted to encourage policy and community support for improved vaccine uptake. So we did this in collaboration with Gavi CSO and MOH as our major stakeholders. Next slide, please. But there were also other stakeholders involved. As you can see on your screen, there's Ianaso, who we were working with a few months prior to this particular podcast session organizing. We had been hosting webinars and X-Spaces discussions on malaria vaccination. The Ministry of Health is in charge of the World Malaria Day preparations, so that's a major stakeholder. And Gavi CSO, for those of you who don't know, it's non-profit organization that deals with civil society organizations. So these were major stakeholders. We identified them. We assessed the level of influence. For instance, the Ministry of Health has direct access to community health volunteers who are very important when you're doing health advocacy at the community level, at the grassroots level. Barriers, like I mentioned, the community leaders such as religious leaders or the men, they can be against vaccination uptake because maybe they feel like it doesn't align with their religious needs, or men just literally do not care about whether their kids are vaccinated. So the civil society organizations have close relationships with the community leaders, and that's why we felt it was important to have them there. Our advocacy strategy was to seek the support of these organizations, and also the support of the communities on the ground a few days before the session. Thank you. Yeah, you can go to the next slide, please. The other one, I think the one you left. Just go back a bit. Okay, as he sorts that out, I guess. We were also working with the community hand in hand. A few days before the event, we had road shows around major towns in Kisumu and even to other places, just telling them that we will be on this location, we'll be having this podcast audiovisual session. So feel free to come in and hear. We made sure that we were using the language that is local to them, that's Luo. We were engaging with them, asking them the questions. We also had leaders from the Ministry of Health in the podcast session. We had some people from the Gavi CSO also sharing the insights in the local language. Yeah. Take me to the next slide, please. Thank you. So, as I've said, we engaged the Ministry of Health and the Gavi CSO to bring expert voices to the discussion. We developed an engaging session. We had some games, we had gifts, we had several activities. The kids who presented some poems or pieces on malaria vaccination or malaria in general. We also mobilized youth leaders and CHVs again through the roadshows and through the Ministry of Health to amplify the messaging and to counter any misinformation. And lastly, we made sure that the audiovisual podcast extended its reach beyond Kisumu County by, producing a quality audiovisual podcast again, just making sure it's quality, like working on the backdrops, everything, and also working with other organizations like IANAS really helped us push the podcast, Gavi CSO also, and the Africa Leaders Malaria Alliance, which is the main funder for Kenya Malaria Youth Corps. Yeah. Next slide, please. So the result achieved from that session was that we were able to strengthen our partnership. Between the MOH, Gavi so Kenya Malaria Corps, and other organizations, even End Malaria Council, which could have been our competitor, but we were able to bring them to our side so that we merged our resources for the road shows. And yeah, I believe I left the organization a while back, but I believe that the work we did then, because we were able to actually engage with the community, ask them what was preventing them from taking the malaria vaccine. We were able to share these insights with the radio stations in the county because it was in their language. We were able to send it to other organizations like Alma. There was another foreign organization also funding the podcast. They were able to get the interpreted version of the podcast. So all these strengthened partnerships means increased funding for the malaria vaccination because currently it's being funded by WHO. So once they're able to see these insights from the local communities, they're actually, this is like evidence for the work that is going on at the community level. Next slide, please. Yeah. So yeah, the conclusion, the case study is a demonstration of how strategic power mapping can enhance public health advocacy efforts. We were able to strengthen community trust in malaria vaccine acceptance by identifying and engaging key decision makers, influencers, and grassroots mobilizers. This experience reinforces the importance of targeted advocacy, multi stakeholder engagement, and effective communication strategies in addressing public health challenges. Thank you. I look forward to your thoughts and questions if there are any.
All right, thank you so much, Esther. This is really a very exciting one. And interestingly, I saw some similarities between uh, Esther's mapping process and that of Ambo's. The first step was Ambrose took like three key steps, while Esther took like four key steps. And interestingly, the first step was identifying key stakeholders, both for Ambrose and Esther, and then analyzing influence or accessing their level of influence in Esther's words and power, then mapping relationship and identifying barriers, which is more like building alliances for in the case of Andrew, and developing a targeted strategy, which is more like the documentation and monitoring in the case of Ambo. So you can see, interestingly, if power mapping is done very much well, you are following, we are following the same direction. It's just that different mode of implementation. So thank you so much, Esther, for sharing your experience with us. This is really exciting, and we are really happy to learn what you are doing down there to advocate against its particular menace of malaria and access to vaccines and other important treatments. So thank you so much, and we'll move to the next speaker, which is Mahot. We'll encourage you to stick to time and focus on the detailed part of the presentation and be audible. So over to you, Mahot.
Okay. Thanks so much, Abdullahi, for the introduction, and I'll make sure I use the 10 minutes effectively. So, hello everyone. I'm good to be here today with you to tell you about I can say it's my dream initiative known as She Can Take, which is all about empowering women, specifically high school girls, in the digital space and in STEM fields. We can go to the next slide. So yeah, next. So what the policy issue we tried to do at first, I was only like in it was just a dream, and then it's a form of like she can take is a form of or a combination of volunteers, which we first planned to do it like for the consecutive years, but then it's now ongoing. So last year what we tried to do is like there is a huge gap in gender about the tech fields and in different STEM involvements, because women's in we can say either in the career or in the workplace, they have been very they didn't have been participating. And if you can see the numbers in Africa, we can see there are like a lot of job opportunities, but then 60 and also 67% of roles today, they require basic digital skills. So what we try to do is like empowering high school girls from the start. So the policy issue we try to solve is how can we decrease this disparity around this gender involvement in tech. So there are a lot of barriers for those there. People's or the society can't believe that they believe that women's don't belong in tech. There's a stigma around that women can't be there in the tech area or in the science, technology, and engineering field. So our objective was to advocate for gender equality, and that everyone, specifically women and girls, can do, and they can participate in tech, and they can also pursue a career in tech. So this was our objective. And also what we wanted to do is we wanted to secure funding so that we give or we empower these high school girls by going to their school, and then volunteering by recruiting volunteers who are already like in the tech field, by also recruiting mentors who can appreciate those girls to pursue a career in tech. So when we see we first set our targets by clearly defining what we wanted to achieve. In our case, it was to increase women's participation in STEM through advocacy and capacity building programs. And we used a specific power mapping method, which is known as the influence interest grid or the power interest matrix. So it has this stage or this method helps us categorize main stakeholders based on two factors, because this is very important in two ways. First, it helps us see how much power they have to influence the outcome, and then also how interested they are in the issue. So there are a lot of funders, there are a lot of societies and organizations which are advocating for gender equality, for women in STEM. So that's what we use. So the first one is high power and high interest. Those were like the decision makers, the government officials, and like the education sector, and specifically the major donors who could directly impact policies and funding. So our strategy focused on keeping them closely engaged and informed with the data. So what we tried is we pitched our initiative in different discussions and platforms. So we pitched, and then we used different networking strategies to reach to those donors. And then next, the high power low interest are the influential figures who may not be directly involved, but then they have like corporate leaders, or we worked on like raising their interest through advocacy campaigns showing how gender diversity could benefit the industry and in general the innovation. And the third, the low power high interest, those were our allies mainly, like grassroots organizations, the community, the youth-led groups, and the passionate educators, including the volunteers and our mentors. While they didn't have direct decision-making power, they were key in spreading awareness and pushing the message from the ground up. So we use those volunteers for us to connect more volunteers and more mentors who are already pursuing a career in tech. So this is very important. And lastly, the low power, low interest section was not our priority, but remained on the map for potential future engagement if their interest or influence grew over time. So generally, we use this technique power interest matrix, which is like a very structured approach, we were able to focus our energy where it mattered the most. So we engaged those with the highest power and interest, and also we secure funding from Girl Up. This opportunity we find it through a networking opportunity, and then we applied for it, and then we secured a small grant to initiate our project. And when we see the different decision makers, we also collaborated with the local community school, which is here in Ethiopia, specifically in the Amara region called Gondar City. So we collaborated with the school officials so that they will lend us their ICT lab so that we teach or we empower those high school girls which were not able to have like mobile iPhone through their home. So we directly go there, and then we teach about we taught them about basic digital literacy, coding skills, and different technological related things, like how they can secure themselves in online, and how they can keep safe their online presence. So the challenge was the different gender biases and the lack of awareness or the resistance from different institutions. We faced different like no's to this idea, because um, most of the private schools, they believe they're already like teaching these girls about the basic digital skills. So we face this kind of challenges. So when we see the actions taken, as I've told you previously, we applied for funding from Garlap United Nations Foundation to initiate that program, and luckily we secured the funding. And we also engaged with the schools. We also built awareness through community outreach and storytelling, which we believe is now the important thing, because we have the data, we have the participants, but then we need to align this data with the each participant's lived experience and the story. So we also believe that it is time for us to use data as a strategic asset. So uh, we have achieved first, like the funding. Securing the funding was a great achievement for us to kickstart the program. And then we also established a very good partnership with local community schools here. And then we also currently have empowered over 75 high school girls, and then we believe we shifted their perception on pursuing a career intake, because they are going to choose which college or which department to join. So we believe this is also an achievement, because we changed their perception that they can. And the key lessons we learned were the importance of strategic networking. So as it was stated earlier, like we need to network so that we grow either the initiative or the program. So networking is very important, and no matter how small or high the funding is, it's very important to apply and to know the impact that's going to take. And finally, the role of the volunteers and also involving the community was very important for us to kickstart the initiative. And final thoughts are currently this initiative is ongoing, but power mapping helps us target the right people and secure critical support. And it's very important to sustain this initiative. And then we are trying our best to make, to make the initiative like expand not only in this community, but also to different regions where women are left alone. And also we believe more policies and funding mechanisms, they should prioritize gender inclusivity intake, and make sure everyone is in the tech area. Thank you so much.
That was really a wow. And thank you so much, Matot. We really learned a lot from this your presentation. And I don't know if I'm the only one noticing, but if this power mapping is done so well, there will be a lot of similarities. It's just the same term, but maybe there could be different processes applied. But if it is done so well, you'll find out that we are arriving at the very much similar result at the end. You may notice that the process that Martha took was to identify key stakeholders using the power interest metrics, which allows her to understand the person in power and their interest, mapping from the low interest to the high power and high interest, then to down to the low power and low interest. So this will give you a very much heads up when you are planning your advocacy or project, and you will be able to leverage on opportunities and also unforeseen opportunities if you are able to do your power mapping so well. And we are excited that you are able to get a grant from the UN Foundation or get up to start this to do this project. And we're really excited about what you are doing in empowering girls in areas of technology, which is similar, or which is we share same ideology and vision here for at the Kabilon Africa think tanks to build an Africa we deserve, and it starts to fighting for our rights and to equipping us with right technological knowledge to compete in the current global market. So thank you so much for the presentation. And the last presentation will not take that long, and we'll be listening from Tata Goodness Afenyu. We're about to hear from Tata, and Tata, if you're here with us, over to you.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Abdullahi. Hello, leaders, goal setters. It's an honor for me to speak to you today. For some reasons, I wasn't able to prepare slides, and I apologize. I'm going to turn off my video because it's affecting the network, and it's poor. It's poorer when the video is on. So let's dive right in. All right, so today I'm going to be talking about power dynamics and mapping, a case study on combating sexual violence in Cameroon, specifically in the crisis hit Northwest region and co-host South and West regions. So we're going to be talking and focusing on how we youth force tackled sexual violence and improve access to justice and healthcare for survivors in Cameroon. This presentation highlights how strategic power mapping can dismantle barriers and shift power for sustainable change. So sexual violence remains a crucial issue in Cameroon. I can say across Africa, I believe each and every one of us have had or heard of at least one case of sexual violence in our communities. And it's often influenced by armed conflicts, being the case in Cameroon, patriarchal norms, and systematic barriers. So here is a policy issue. Here are problems we identified that survivors of sexual violence face. They face legal barriers, which in most cases delay services reaching to them. You might see survivors of sexual violence applying to the court. They have been violated, they have been abused, they need assistance or they need justice. And the court, on the other hand, tends to take a very long time processing all of that. And this leaves survivors totally depressed. Also, healthcare challenges. It is proven that 38% of healthcare services in the crisis zones of Cameroon have been completely shut down and are non-operational. This also influences the ability of survivors of sexual violence to access healthcare. Also, cultural stigmatization. We will agree that in most of our communities and communities and societies or our countries, sexual violence or rape, if I may say so, is a very hardly talk about issue. You hear community leaders saying, no, don't talk about it. It will tarnish the image of the community. The family will hide them behind closed doors, saying it will destroy the name of the family. So this is how we use power mapping to help remedy or cause a change to seeing that this issue is being solved. So like we earlier on said, power mapping is a visual tool which we use to identify decision makers and how we can utilize these decision makers in shifting policies or changing policies. So here are the questions youth force used in their power mapping process. Who has the power to make decisions? Who influences those who have the power in making decisions? And how can we engage or challenge these actors? All right, so was spoken about our barriers. I'm just trying to be as brief as possible so we all keep up to time. All right, so the first step we took was identifying our key actors. We used the convenient random sampling technique to identify our key actors. We mapped 75 decision makers across the three regions, that is the west, south, and northwest regions of Cameroon. And these key decision makers fall under our primary targets. The second step, we identified who our secondary targets are. That is the community leaders, the traditional leaders, the law enforcers, which included our police officers, the commissioners, and all of those. Also our health practitioners, because we use them in getting these policies changed or in influencing these policies. Also, we built alliance with these people by engaging the stakeholders in targeted workshops and advocacy campaign. We organize workshops with health practitioners by getting experts in that field to talk to them about abortion laws in Cameroon. By the way, I'm sorry if this is because it's a very sensitive topic, and due to cultural sensitivity in Cameroon, it is legal. Abortion is legal only for survivors of sexual violence, that is those who have been raped, and if the pregnancy poses risks to the mother. Those are the only two cases for legal abortion in Cameroon. So yes, we engage those health practitioners to talk to them about the laws surrounding abortion and sexual violence in Cameroon, and also train them on effective abortion, how to carry out an abortion successfully. We also relate information from our research, because in power mapping, you have to do your research, because you don't just want to choose anybody, because not everybody is your audience, not everybody is your target. That's why we need to target those who we need to shift our policies and get our results. So relate information from our research on sexual violence and abortion to key decision makers, and by so doing, we then gave them recommendations. We brought these young girls, these potential victims of sexual violence, and some survivors, to give them the recommendations, because they will hear their cry since they are mostly affected. Also, we organize workshops with law enforcers, traditional leaders, educational leaders, religious leaders, and community leaders, because these are people who work directly with these people who are easily perpetrated. So we're able to gather information on how sexual violence is being treated in their communities, and we educated them on how to better treat it. All of that in effort of changing the narrative. This also helped us partner with these people to get a referral network, because our organization also run a power counseling center. So by doing, with engaging with all these people, we built a referral network. All right, so far so good with our project. We have had significant reports from the communities on sexual violence cases, on rape cases. It's good we also know that this project is currently on the monitoring and evaluation phase, so we are still building a report that will perfectly convey the results from this. But so far, we've had cases on sexual violence, and we've also been able to help some survivors get legal assistance, which is a good sign, a sign showing that these our efforts are working. Also, we had, I did not earlier mention, we had a press conference with decision makers, which somehow compelled them to acting. Because sometimes we go to decision makers and they just listen and do nothing. But we held a press conference with radio stations, TV stations, and newsletters. By so doing, the decision makers know what is expected of them. We told them at the press conference, we are working on this and this, eradicating sexual violence and strengthening the abortion laws in Cameroon for survivors of sexual violence, of course. And we are targeting these delegations, these councils, these mayors, and all of that. So the decision makers knew they had to be involved, and so they were. That's just in a nutshell. That's power is fluid. Key lessons learned. We have intersectionality helps in advocacy. We combined, like earlier mentioned, we worked with churches, with schools, with community leaders, traditional leaders, all of those people who are directly or indirectly are affected by sexual violence. They worked in an intersectional advocacy strategy, and it worked so well, combining legal reforms with cultural engagement, which created a holistic impact. Also, like Ambrose earlier on mentioned, data drives change. Presenting evidence, that is statistics from our research of the systematic failures, of course, helped help us compel decision makers to take action. All right. So this case study clearly demonstrates how power mapping is not just a tool, but a strategy to reclaim systems designed to maybe bring down our objectives. It's a strategy to reclaim those rights which we think we have lost. By identifying power holders, decision makers, and engaging our allies, we transform the lives of some survivors in Cameroon. I will believe someday we'll be able to touch the lives of all survivors in Cameroon. I will end with these little quotes. When we understand where power lies, we can shift it towards justice. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to your question and insights. Thank you very much. Over to you, Mr. Abdullahi.
Thank you so much, Esther. This is really an engaging session, and I believe we are learning a lot. So I don't know if you have noticed, for those of us that have been following, you might notice that there is also some similarities in Tata's power mapping strategies with other people or other speakers that shared. One of the things they used was mapping key actors using the convenient random sampling, meaning that they were able to map people that they can conveniently reach, or people that can conveniently participate in whatever advocacy they are doing. And then they map out their secondary target and they build partnership and alliances, which is more exactly what other speakers talked about. So these are people that are coming from different countries, except for Ambrose and Esther, that are coming from Kenya. And you might notice that there are a lot of similarities in what they presented. That means if power mapping is really done so well, we'll arrive at the same end result, which is to get the key people or key organizations or governments or stakeholders to participate or to contribute to whatever advocacy we are trying to do. So we apologize once again for going like almost 25 minutes over time. This was not planned, but we were really learning a lot. So this is also a learning curve for us, and we'll do a proper time allocation during our next webinar. So before we round up, I will say thank you once again to our speakers. Thank you, Ambrose Wanjala from Kenya. Thank you, Esther Moronga from Kenya as well. Thank you, Mahtot Lekon Sisi from Ethiopia. And again, thank you, Tata Goodness Afenyahu from Cameroon. We really are excited with this your presentations, and we're happy to have you always. So Tata, the speakers are part of the Caribbean Africa think tank Youth Country Focus. They represent the Caribbean Africa in their various countries. And they are the first and piloting cohort of the Youth Country Focus. So watch out for other opportunities that are coming up in the Caribbean Africa think tank. Stay connected with us in our social media, LinkedIn group, and you can also visit our website, which will be in the chat box, to register to be a member of the Caribbean Africa think tank. So before I go, I will hand over to our host, the convener of Caribbean Africa think tank, Safia, for a closing remark. And then from there, we'll pick up the conversation in our subsequent communications. So thank you so much, and over to you, Safia.
Thank you, Abdullahi. Thank you to our wonderful speakers. You've been amazing. We're going to be uploading this on YouTube, and we're going to continue the conversation in the group. So if you're not in the group yet, please join the LinkedIn group, because I have some questions and possibly others have questions around it. So we're going to be posting this on YouTube, sharing it on our social media, and also engage in the group with questions around it. Really excellent examples. Again, we're sorry. I think we need to kind of figure out how to make our webinar. There's just so much richness. That's part of the challenge. There's a satisfaction survey in the link. We'll also, in the chat box, we'll also send it by email as well. We want to know how you felt about the session, the webinar. This is an open event, so it's open for everyone beyond our youth country focals. Thank you so much, and we won't spend any more time. We just want to say a big thank you. You'll get a follow-up email with the satisfaction survey, all the links to join, and the webinar is a monthly thing, so we always share, and please register. That's the way we want to make sure it's a safe space and contained space. General Assembly for Youth is on Friday, 4 p.m. West African time. See you then. Thank you so much. We appreciate you.